Hello. Hello, we have a good turnout. That's great. Nice to meet you guys. My name is Derek Cowell. Let me get down the names, okay? So I can give you your extra credit points. I assure you that these points add up. They really could help you get into a comfortable position with your grade. But because of people's work schedules, etc., I still feel as if I should make it extra credit and not mandatory. All right. A couple of you already, though, if you don't mind, I have just like a first name or just a first name. If you could please on the chat or just unmute yourself and tell me. If you could let me know your full name, I'd appreciate it, at least the first week. So like not to call you out, but like Ricky and Izzy, what are your full names, guys? Sorry.
My name is Ricardo Vera.
Okay, Ricardo Vera, Nicholas Ricardo. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Let's see who else. Yeah, this is a great turnout. So hopefully you were able to read my announcements. All right. Thank you, Erica. And sorry, I'm a terrible multitasker. But as I'm getting these names down, hopefully you've been able to read, receive, and take a look at my announcements, right? And with the announcements, thank you, Ashley. Let's see here. I have these argumentative assignments that you're going to do constitute 68% of your grade. Thank you, Christian. And I may have missed it, but could I please get Sammy's last name?
My name is Shamgar Orolana.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, let's see here. Yeah, this is a great problem to have. So many names to put down. I look forward to this. I'll have a more efficient way of doing this in the future, okay? I'm gonna print out your names, and then I could just find your name and put a check by it in the future, okay? So it won't always take this long. Just in my quest to do other things that had evaded my attention to do that. That's what I normally do anyway. And Jessica, how about you? Your last name? Have anything from Jessica?
Hi, sorry, I'm here. I'm also working. So I'm trying to just check in while I'm working. Jessica Bligh, B-L-I-G-H.
You got it. No, I appreciate you, Jessica, especially working. I love that. I've had semesters where I've had people kind of crouching in a work uniform in the back of the place of employment just during my meeting, getting permission from his employer to do so. Going right back.
I run a daycare out of my home, so I'll be here when I can, and then I'll throw my phone when I have to go deal with toddlers.
I completely understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So what I'm going to do, you guys, I'm going to share the screen. Hello?
Hi, it's me, Alma. I'm also at work. I'm the after-school coordinator for one of the elementary schools. I don't know if you can hear me okay.
I
So
can,
I'm at
Alma.
work and you cannot?
I can indeed. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm at work. I'm the after-school coordinator for one of the elementary schools here in Riverbend. So I'm at work. So if I have to kind of tend to a child, sorry, but I'm here.
I understand. Thank you.
Mhm.
No, sometimes just in fairness to those who are here, if I notice, because I get a ding every time someone drops off. And if I get several dings and the attrition's pretty high and I go on for a while, I want to reward those who have stuck in there. And so I'll go back over the names again at the end. But I don't always do that, especially if there's just one or two. And I usually try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I appreciate you letting me know. Thank you for that. So if it's in one of those cases where there is some attrition and I want to go back over the names at the end of the meeting, I will keep that in mind. All right. And let you have credit. Because yeah, it's a completely different world. I did my undergraduate work with, I'm going to share the screen here, okay? I did undergraduate work without having to work a job besides tutoring. And then working full time for my master's, it was a completely different world. So I get it. It's very difficult to juggle the two, and I applaud you. I really do. And all the more for making it to a non-mandatory Zoom meeting. So yeah, whatever you can, I'll be happy to reward you with extra points. And like I said, they afford you a good cushion because on tests 2 and 3 and on quizzes 3, 4, 5, and 6, sometimes you won't ace them. And this gives you a nice buffer, if you will, to still go for that A. And so I would highly recommend whenever you can make it, please do so. Okay. Otherwise, when you can't, you can't. And I will post these. Notice also, you don't even have to wait necessarily for me to post them during the week. I should have no excuse but to have them up by Wednesday at the latest, having a Monday Zoom. So you have at least Wednesday through Sunday to look at the Zoom. But I notice I have the previous semester's Zooms on there as well. It's a different class, obviously, of students, but it's the same material. So you could jump ahead and look at my old Zooms as well, okay, to give you context to what's going on. And I just like to just make sure we're on the same page and help you along, because every instructor has his or her own unique, quirky way of teaching a class. We're given a bit of latitude, although we have certain standards and certain topics that we all are to cover. In a U.S. history class, there's still quite a bit of latitude at the college level to teach it in our own style. And I'm no aberration from that. I do it in my style, but I believe firmly in it. I really do. So take a look at this if you would. I gave you a phone number. Primarily, however, I would love for you to contact me via Canvas message. I check those daily and at least usually. And so I would recommend Canvas message and letting me know if you have an issue with anything to do with the class. If you have an issue, sometimes it needs to be known, in your private life, and you disclose whatever you want to disclose. But I reserve the right in the syllabus to give some leeway to students that are going through a lot in their personal lives. Notice, right, if it's late, and that means even if it's 1 minute late after midnight on Sunday, I take 10 points off of your 50-point argumentative assignments. If it's a month late, I take 20 points off. But I reserve the right to make exceptions if it seems like you're going through a lot, etc. But please try to keep in mind that you have a full week to do each assignment. So try to keep that in mind with your personal lives, your work, your family, and everything else, okay? Let's see here. We go until the 29th of April, and those are some important dates. If you want to refund, if you want to drop without a W on the 23rd, pass, no pass by the 8th of February, drop with a W but without an F by April 4th. All right, so keep those in mind. Notice the textbook is volume 2. Okay, make sure that you got volume 2. You should be able to get it through the school. So yeah, Alan Brinkley's American History Connecting with the Past. What I expect you guys to be able to do is demonstrate factual knowledge of key political, economic, social, and cultural events and issues in the U.S. and its history since 1865. Apply critical thinking to historical concepts and developments in history. Evaluate, analyze, and interpret primary and secondary sources and make historical arguments based upon those. Primary sources are from the time period that we're studying. So whether it be like a quotation from a person in a great position of power, like a president, a speech, etc. Love letters between a husband and a wife from that time period. Anything from that time period is a primary source. Anything written by historians that are in archives, looking at primary sources and putting together a book is a secondary source. Okay. And so I'm giving you obviously secondary source material, but I try to use some primary sources for quotes and facts, etc. Obviously, right? So let's see here. I'm going to skip down to my responsibilities. So via handouts, textbook reading, intermittent Zoom meetings, and lecture videos, I commit to share, organize, and facilitate students' familiarity with and analysis and evaluation of political, social, ideological, and economic documented history of the U.S., commensurate in depth with at least a lower division level collegiate course. I will not simply lecture. A lot of this is kind of tailored to be in person, which I dearly miss and hope to return to soon. But I'm proud of the fact that history, there's a lot of subjectivity in history. You have facts, but there's so many out there, right? That which you decide, that which you come across, that which you choose to look for, right? Sometimes could be predicated by just out of sheer ignorance, and that applies to myself still after teaching this course for several years. I come across new books, old books, primary sources that blow my mind, that change my interpretation of a given event or my view of something. And so we're limited in what, our access to the facts. And we're also sometimes historians can be very manipulative in the facts that they choose to find and use, right, and put in their book, because oftentimes they have a set ideology, a string of assumptions that they're bringing with them into the book to begin with, right? And it's going to dictate the type of facts they look for, find, cite, etc. And then sometimes, you have an amalgam of facts, and then you have, in a given time period, and then just after that, we as human beings, we crave meaning in everything, right? And order, oftentimes, arguably. And so what we try to do is we try to build a string of causation. Oh, this, and this happened, and that's what caused this event 10 years later to happen. And there's a lot of argumentative subjectivity in that, right? Subjectivity, like saying who is the best athlete that's ever lived. You could base your assertion upon data and logic, but the barometer, the measuring sticks you use, your observations, how much someone puts into certain statistics of that person's athletic career, they're going to vary, and there's not going to be consensus on it. So that's what I mean by subjectivity, as opposed to objectivity, right? With an objective fact is, like what you find more in the hard sciences. If two people were standing on a roof and they disagreed about the laws of gravity, if they took a step off the roof, they'd both fall alike, right? And so you're dealing with a lot of subjectivity in history, depending upon what facts you use, and then what import you put upon those facts, what meaning and order you put on those facts, as far as causation, especially, as what caused this or that to happen. And I love that personally, because it's going to continue to host a lot of discourse, a lot of debate perennially. And to some people, though, that they want 2 + 2 = 4, it can be a little frustrating, and I can understand that. But I'm more of a messy brain myself, so I enjoy it. So I want to kind of play with that and have you guys utilize your critical thinking skills in my class, okay? Because to me, right, as far as the utility of history, how many of us, our lives are going to be enhanced or affected in any way, one way or the other, by knowledge of President Lincoln's birthday and exact day of his death, right? And that's a rhetorical question, the answer to which is none, not at all, right? And so what I want this class to do is to be useful for you. Many of you are not history majors. This is a formal criterion for you guys to, to fulfill. And so I want to make it more useful for you and utilizing your critical thinking skills. Because after all, no matter what you're majoring in, no matter what your job is, how could that be a bad thing, right? Have you guys work on thinking and devising arguments. And then secondly, I like to think that it makes history a little less boring for those of you who are just taking this as a necessity. All right. So that's what you're going to see week after week, with just a couple weeks exceptions, is you're going to see a given section, and it's going to be highly opinionated. It's going to have one singular paramount argument that it's conveying. I try to defend that argument, right? But in some weeks and some topics, I arguably do more effectively than others. And not only that, I've put together some of these arguments literally with a grin on my face, thinking, you know what, I could think of things counter to what I'm writing right now, but I'm going to keep that to myself, right? And so by all means, be as critical as you want of what you're reading. Don't just imbibe it and say, okay, see, I read on a number 2 of Reconstruction argument, such and such. And so that's my interpretation of Reconstruction. No, I want you to not even care what I personally think about given topics. I want you to think for yourselves, okay? But the arguments that I do put out there, for those of you, the few of you who are history majors, I like to think that I'm also giving you a little early introduction. Maybe you even had it in high school if you had a really good teacher. But they call it historiography, the art and science of history, and different debates and different interpretations to the same topics. I'm giving you an early step on that, because if you do graduate work later on in history, that's what it will largely entail, is going through different interpretations. That was the most fun I've had in history in grad school. I'd have an instructor give me a book, tell me a book to read, and say, I want you to see his take on the Third Reich, right, on the Nazi Third Reich. And then I'd finish the book, I'd write a page kind of summary of it. I'd have to defend what the author had defended, and then I was encouraged to try to rebut it. And then I was given access to other students, and they had different books from different authors with different interpretations to the Third Reich. And to me, it was just fascinating. It was nothing short of absolute fun. And so that's what kind of encouraged me to have this type of an approach to my history class. I thought that's helpful for history majors and less boring for non-history majors and more useful to their lives. All right. So with students, I mean, as far as your responsibilities, so much of it, right, is please just make sure that you do your steady work. Like I said, 68% of your grade is comprised of the argumentative assignments week in and week out. So that's your bread and butter. That's where you're going to earn your A in my class. Okay. So make sure that you stick through it week in, week out. To me, that's what's most important. More important than how you do on a few tests, because I understand some people don't take tests well, myself included. Anything argumentative and written, I did fairly well on in school. But boy, standardized test, I just freaked out. And I'd miss questions and I'd look at them afterwards when they were handed back to us, and I'd be so frustrated. Like, oh man, I knew that too. And so that's why I bring this philosophy and approach to my class. All right. Steps for coming onto campus from my my department meeting. I inferred that there's almost semi chaos going on right now as far as getting back onto campus. For those of you who have classes there, but take a look at this, okay? If that's applicable to you, if you're taking any classes on campus, I just copied and pasted it from a website there on the school's website. All right, and let's get right into the schedule. So the first week, right, you have virtually an entire week, Monday through Sunday night at midnight. We're doing the Reconstruction of the South. That's kind of where they have set the chronological line in half of U.S. history is at the end of the Civil War. So the Reconstruction of the South, then we do Turner's thesis on the West. Then we do the Gilded Age and Gilded Age Part 2, and then you have a week to do Test 1. So all these you find in modules. You just go to modules, right? Hit on it, submit your answer by the coming Sunday night. And Test 1, same thing, but you'll find it in quizzes. All right. Then we cover overseas imperialism, progressivism, Woodrow Wilson and World War I, the Roaring 20s, and then we do Test 2. Then we do FDR and the New Deal, World War II, the Cold War, Civil Rights Movement, Cold War Part 2, and then we have our final. And that's it, with the exception of the quizzes. And the quizzes are on your own time. I'll send you announcements from time to time to remind you, all right? But they're the only thing in my class that are solely based on the textbook, all right? Like I said, I want the majority of my class to be comprised of argumentative points made by different historians that I've read, professors I've sat under, etc. But I want you to also have a decent knowledge of the facts. So the textbook is kind of dry and factually laden. And so I want you to go in there and find the answers out of the textbook to those 6 quizzes, okay? And as far as points, that's everything. In my class, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. All right. And notice you get 5 extra credit points each time you attend a Zoom meeting. So then now I'm going to stop sharing this. All right. And I am going to share with the Reconstruction argumentative assignment. So hopefully you all see that now. So numbers 1 and 2, I want you to read, just in case you haven't had your History 101 yet, or it's been a while, just to give you context, right? Because they're reconstructing the South because the South has been destroyed by the Civil War. So what do people think of the Civil War? All right, I have a very binary dichotomy between court history and revisionist history. All right, now court history, let's see here. Court history is as if a king or queen or emperor, right, were to tell his or her scribe, I want you to write a history of me and of my kingdom, right? Well, that scribe has to select facts, conveniently omit other facts, right? Leave them out, interpret those facts, and present them in a certain manner. At least those steps in writing history, right? And so in doing so, how do you think that court scribe is going to make the emperor look? His or her kingdom. I mean, you think that the scribe will feel latitude to be really critical? Anybody have an argument on that? Probably not, right? When I think of like the early modern era or the medieval era or sooner than that, right? And so oftentimes court history, it justifies and praises those who have won politically, economically, and socially. Who have won politically? Rulers, those who ruled, right? The powerful, those in key positions of power. Economically, those who were able to dictate how resources are allocated, and of course, allocate a lion's share of resources to themselves and their own demographic. Remember, demographic, just a fancy word for population category, right? Their class, basically. In this case, I'm talking about. So those who won governmentally, politically, those who won economically, and those who won socially. Socially, you get to dictate culture. You get to dictate normative behavior. You get to dictate what people are taught is right and wrong, and what values to uphold and what values to scorn, etc. Right? So court history, right, is going to make our presidents and our leaders look wonderful. Okay? And then revisionist history wants to do just what the word implies. It wants to revise, it wants to change, it wants to challenge, or wants to overthrow traditional court history. So when you're doing your 101 class, right, you hear that praise for the founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, etc., right, John Adams. Revisionist history would call them WASP, slave-owning hypocrites. Not John Adams, but you get my point. All right. And so Marxist history is often entailed with revisionist history. It looks for conflict and competition, right? It assumes that the capitalist system is inherently parasitical, that for someone to win, others have to lose, right? So like in nature, you have your big, powerful predators and they gobble other people up. We're going to get to that soon on the Gilded Age with like Rockefeller and Carnegie and the different robber barons, right? That really took off as entrepreneurs during that time period in business. So it assumes that the capitalist system is inherently parasitical. It vilifies or makes villains. It vilifies the winners, those who have won. And tries to elicit empathy for those who have lost politically as far as having a voice and any power, who have lost economically as far as their access to resources and opportunities for, they call it socioeconomic ascension, moving up the social and economic ladder, and those who have lost socially, who are considered like pariahs or outcasts and not highly esteemed in society. So Marxist history, it wants to do that, okay? And then post-civil rights era history often employs Marxist history. It oftentimes looks from an ethnic lens. And it too elicits empathy for those who have been victimized and highlights their valiant struggle for justice and opportunities. All right. Are there any questions so far? Am I being semi-clear on these? So you see what I mean? It's not going to take you much time at all. And you're going to read a given section. You're going to be like, oh, that's court history. He's praising President so-and-so. He's praising those, the robber barons for earning their ascendance, for deserving their rise, right? And oh no, this one is definitely revisionist history. It's definitely challenging the powerful. This is actually Marxist history because it seems to be focused upon economics and power, and it's clearly wanting me to empathize with those who have lost. Or this one, right, is post-civil rights history in the sense of eliciting my empathy for African Americans, for Hispanic Americans, for women, and highlighting their struggles. So those are some of the broad categories that you'll find when you read a given history book on U.S. history. Certainly not comprehensive. There are others as well. As a matter of fact, please indulge me one more. Functional history. Little to no focus upon conflict and competition and vilifying one group and making heroes of another, right? But focuses upon how each demographic, each category of the population, and remember, oftentimes when we get into demographic, that term, very often it's found in two manners. One is ethnic, right? When it looks at, as far as the ethnic one, right? Through an ethnic lens. So for instance, there's an acronym that I might throw out every now and then. You might be familiar with it. It's WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. To some historians, WASP men have unfairly dominated this country. And they're depicted in many history books now as semi-villains, right? So oftentimes, demographic, when I use that term, oftentimes a category of the population, oftentimes it's either meant to be ethnically interpreted as an ethnic group, your demographic, and then many other times it's depicted as a socioeconomic group, what you do for a living. So small subsistence farmers, industrial laborers working in the factories, miners, right? Railroad workers. Those would be examples of demographics. Okay, but focuses upon how each demographic contributes to the functioning of society. And I could think of no better example of showing how amoral functional history could be, or like they don't want to touch anything too controversial, right? And make villains of any group and so forth, whereby you'll get history books on how slave labor helped capitalist economic development in the US. They don't, now, if you look at Marxist post-civil rights history, right? You're going to look at how awfully they treated the slaves, how the slaves employed their own agency is a word used oftentimes, right? That they were moral agents that did things for themselves and helped dictate the way the future direction of events went. You're going to get that from post-civil rights history or Marxist history on slavery, of how awful it was and how valiantly they tried to demand their rights and work within the confines of their situation. functional history would say, well, if it weren't for all the picking of cotton, what would have happened to the textile industry? What would have happened to the lending industry, et cetera, et cetera. So functional history doesn't look at good versus bad, villains versus heroes, but looks at how we got to where we are today, right? I think of like a little tree sapling, and today it's a big redwood. And you think, okay, this wasn't always a redwood. You know, how did it grow up to where it is right now, good and bad? And so that's what functional history is about. All right. And so yeah, those are some examples of the manner by which an historian looks at the facts is going to be colored by his or her preconceptions of what he or she thinks about people, about life, about what makes events happen, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a simple dichotomy between 1 and 2. Number 1, remember, these are read only. With number 1, it's court history. It praises our country. It praises the abolitionists in particular, right? And states that the Civil War it constituted a crusade to end slavery. That finally America developed a conscience, and that development of a conscience helped create a clash with the powers that be in the South in particular. And that clash ended gloriously with the good guys winning, the North winning against the 11.5 states of the South, and defeating them in the Civil War. The good guys won. Slavery was done away with. This immoral, archaic institution was finally put to rest. And we have to praise for that the federal government, the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln, the abolitionists. Okay? So that's what you find in number 1. Then number 2 says, no, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think that virtually the whole country was racist. I think virtually the whole country was indifferent toward slavery. I think the Republican Party and the northern states fought for their own selfish reasons, not to end slavery. That the well-being of Black men and women was not at the forefront of their motives and of their thoughts as they fought the Civil War. But it was almost a byproduct of the Civil War, was ending slavery. And you have an interesting revisionist interpretation by a guy named William H. Dunning, Dunning, and Dunning himself was a Southerner. And this historian stated that I think the North did what it did for African Americans to punish and weaken the white South. That they almost did what they did for Black men and women spitefully toward the white South, not out of humanitarianism, not being ahead of their time, being progressive, but for their own ulterior motives, which also included, right? There was talk found in number 2 that if they were to emancipate the slaves, they could immediately employ them as soldiers. And that would be very useful to the Union Army in winning the Civil War, is utilizing Black soldiers. All right. So if you'd adhere to number 2, right? And remember, there could be some truth to both of them. When I have these either or categories up here, okay? You know, oftentimes reality and human beings are messy or complex. So there could be some elements to truth to both, okay? You don't have to necessarily adhere fully to one section and not another. So keep that in mind. Then with number 3 is I try to state that the North, for a season, reacted as an equal opposite reaction to a stubborn Southern president in Andrew Johnson after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, that there was a short season of a great zeal in the North and in the Republican Party to change the South for the better, to give African Americans certain rights, privileges, opportunities, right? And to get away from the antebellum or before the Civil War structure of things. Okay. And then there's evidence of them doing that. So I show evidence of President Andrew Johnson being very obstinate, very stubborn, very racist, according to the primary sources. And sure as heck, not much of a friend and advocate for Black men and women. So then Congress has its 1866 elections, and the North elects a majority, according to Eric Foner, a well-known historian on this topic, of radical Republicans who demand change and help for African Americans. So wow, here we go, right? You get the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery. You get the 14th Amendment that enfranchised or gave citizenship rights to African American men. And you get the 15th Amendment that stated, just in case it's not certain as to what constitutes, according to the 14th Amendment, the rights, privileges, and benefits and protections of citizenship, that political participation is included in that list. So now they could run for office, they could vote, right? Black men. So 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Wow. They put 5 military governors over the South. They put the troops and kept the troops down there to secure law and order. And the second section of the 14th Amendment stated that if you had promised to support the Union in the past and then broke that promise by supporting the Confederacy during the Civil War, then you're deprived of your citizenship status for 2 years. So who had given that promise? People in the armed forces, any politician who had to swear an oath to the Constitution in the past. So basically the most powerful were stripped of their citizenship rights for 2 years. Now, African Americans are going to the polls and voting at, according to Eric Foner's book, 90% are going to the polls to vote. And now, what do you know? They elect 16 African American congressmen, over 600 African American state assemblymen, and thousands of African Americans to lesser local offices. And of course, the white racists in the South decried this as Negro rule. So wow, they brought about some changes, huh? They also put an end to the infamous black codes that very much circumscribed what African Americans could and could not do. All right. They also put in safety net legislation. They established public schools. They established orphan asylums. They were known back then as insane asylums, modernized penitentiaries. But all this cost money, and they began to spin themselves into debt, right? So then cries come up that the quote Negroes in office are spending our state into bankruptcy. And then there were cries of corruption as well. And in some cases, corruption did exist. But you have to recall also that African Americans constituted the majority of politicians only in some sections of the Black Belt of Mississippi, only in some sections of New Orleans, around New Orleans and in Louisiana, and in some areas, or actually quite a few areas of South Carolina. But that's it. As far as Negro rule, you never had a majority of Southern politicians Black. We never have. So they get branded as corrupt prodigals who are spending all the state's money. And you can only imagine all the things they were trying to tackle. You have newly enfranchised African Americans trying to make a way for themselves now, right? And you had a variety of Republicans who were for ending slavery, but who disagreed on what to do next. Because you think about it, right? Like Rome, the Netherlands, other civilizations, they have levels of citizenship. You could be free, and that's all that it entails. You're free, you're not under a master, but nothing else. You could have basic economic rights, whereby you have the right to rent and purchase property, receive wages, buy and sell, and participate in the capitalist economy. You could have basic political protections, that level of citizenship, whereby criminal code applies to you, and not just as because it always had to African Americans as far as being suspects, of course, right? If they had committed a crime. But if someone had committed a crime against them, they had no previous voice in the courts, in the court of law, to defend themselves and to make charges against someone else for having infringed upon their rights. So you have basic political protections level of citizenship that can be given to you. And then ultimately you could have suffrage. And suffrage is the right to participate in government, to run for office, to vote, etc. So the Republicans were all over the place in disagreement. There was nothing even that approximated unity as far as what to do with African Americans at the end of the Civil War. How much ought to be given them, right? So at first, what you see is you see a lot of punitive things. We're going to take away citizenship from the Confederate leaders for 2 years. We're going to enfranchise the quote Negroes, right? That's the term they use in the 1800s. We're going to give citizenship rights to Black men, right? But that's about as far as it went, right? And actually give them suffrage by way of the 15th Amendment, obviously. So then they start going bankrupt. There are cases of accusations of misrule, of quote Negro misrule. And the white Republicans and the white Southern Republicans, who were known as scalawags in their time period by the other racist whites in the South, they did not come to the aid and protection of African Americans. Time goes by, 12 years from 1865 to 1877. And by 77, a presidential candidate says, I promise to pull out the troops and let the South do what it wants. In the person of Rutherford B. Hayes. So Reconstruction fails. About 100 years later, nearly 100 years later, the civil rights movement and its leaders had to fight anew for social justice for African Americans, right? So I'm saying in number one, there was momentary zeal, but it wasn't lasting, especially when the going got tough, dealing with debt, accusations of misrule, the passage of time. It waned, it lost. So you see there at the bottom, Americans had lost interest and Republicans lacked the staying power necessary when fraught with obstacles. So the South's needed revolution was abandoned. And number two's thesis is very simple. That you can't resolve a social problem with political solutions. So if a law says that African Americans can rent and buy property by standard of the law, okay, well, you can't overtly defy that law. On many counts, you can't. In a federal republic where state and local governments share power with the central government, there's a little bit of room for that kind of defiance, as our history has shown. But overall, right, when the government states that, they have that right now. They have the right to go to the polls and vote. That right's theirs. But what if you have a chance to rent or sell your property You find out that it's a black man, you just suddenly come up with excuses as to why you no longer want to rent or sell that land to that person. They go to vote, right? You can intimidate them at the polls. The KKK punished them for voting and literally terrorized African Americans in the South for galvanizing their numbers and voting as a voting bloc, the Ku Klux Klan. So there are ways to circumvent the law. But the problem is, right, is with the human heart and the human mind. You know, a century later, Martin Luther King, when his home was bombed, his front porch, he told the angry crowd, don't be angry. Don't be angry. These people don't know any better. They were taught to hate us. But what was learned, he said, can be unlearned, especially amongst malleable children. So that's where I go on number 2. Say, okay, there were laws that were made to improve the plight of African Americans, no doubt. But there are ways to get around that, to circumvent it for Southern racist whites. And they should have done things to try to tackle the problem at its source, to try to end discrimination in the hearts and minds of the Southern people, white people. There could have been something as far as an integration of public schools for children, teaching them pluralism and tolerance from a very young age. They could have allowed, although this is from a different thesis somewhat, because this is an external source, and I'm saying the problem is internal, right? But they could have allowed miscegenation, interethnic marriage and procreation to do its work as far as trying to sow harmony between Black and white Southerners. They shouldn't have segregated their churches. Christianity could have been a source of unity for Black and white Southerners, but instead they went to Black and white churches with their own emphases. So hence the problem, the problem wasn't pulled out by the root, the weed of racial intolerance. And mere laws were not going to do the job. And that's what I'm trying to convey on number 2. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment. I'm going to go to this blank document here in just a moment. So your response. Right. I do not care. This is not an English class. So by all means, use the first person, speak, write informally. I'm perfectly fine with that. All right. And so, for instance, let's see here. Section number 3 suggests that Northern and Republican Party zeal for fundamentally changing and improving the South was superficial and short-lived. The section claims that Northern and Republican Party sentiment became momentarily idealistic, where you're wanting to improve the world, right? Change the world for the better. The section claims, you don't have to use fancy words, and I'm not trying to show off. I'm just a nerd who reads a lot. The section claims that Northern and Republican Party sentiment became momentarily idealistic simply in reaction to the stubborn and racist manner in which President Johnson dealt with the war-torn South. Evidence of change is given, such as the 13th through 15th Amendments. However, the writer suggests that when Southern states faced financial difficulties and accusations of corrupt misrule, the Republicans lacked the cohesion and the heart to keep the crusade going in the South. Let's see here. The writer uses factual support for his claims fairly well until the end. As for Republican failure to stay unified and to keep, and to the expression, stay the course, no evidence is given for this. Is there evidence of black and white Republican politicians parting ways? Is there evidence of white Republican politicians teaming up with Southern white racist political leaders? If so, such tangible evidence is missing from the section. Something like that. All right. Can I get a thumbs up or anything? Have I helped you at all on this first assignment? You feel, thank you. You feel any better about what you're facing? Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that, guys. All right, and so that's what you're doing. And remember, okay, is what I'm also going to do is from time to time, I'm going to put some test questions from that given topic that are going to be found on the upcoming test on this topic. I'm going to put them on Canvas for you to see what's coming, okay? I could even provide you a study guide if you like. Or even the test itself, give you a copy of the test itself for you to look at. So remember that you'll have questions on test 1 found in a lot of these sections, but you're only asked to analyze or pick apart and evaluate, put value on how believable or credible it is on one section of your choosing. And I chose section 3. All right.
We're supposed to read chapter 15 this week. Like,
Yes, that would be great. Remember, the textbook to me is supplementary. And
okay,
so
is
notice
that
I don't have it completely integral. It's not integral to these assignments, but it sure as heck will help you. It should.
is that where like our test questions come from?
Yes, the
textbook?
test questions come from both. That's a great question. The test questions will primarily actually come from these argumentative write-ups, but I usually have at least about 5 questions that are right out of the textbook on each of the 3 tests. And the quizzes, your 6 quizzes, come solely from the textbook.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so let's see here.
So if we start on this now, would we be able to email it to you to see if like we're doing everything right before we submit it?
Of course. Yeah, you could send it as an attachment to me on Canvas message. If you could, that would be great. I love this. The dings were not people leaving, they were people adding. So that's great. I'm trying to get everyone who was not initially here. I'm trying to get your names down for your extra credit. Yeah, I have those names. Okay, good, good, good. All right, so I'm done blabbing about the topic. Are there any basic questions about the class? Anything that I haven't yet conveyed that's not clear? Anything at all? All right, as I put in the announcement, hopefully by the end of this week, I will be apprised of my schedule, my teaching schedule at another school. And as soon as I do, I will be able to make office hours. And there will probably be at least, I'm only obligated with one class at MJC. I'm only obligated to 30 minutes, but I'm going to stay at least an hour. And so, but it might just be 1 hour per week. But if I can gain access to an office, likely on East Campus, I'll let you guys know and try to acquire an office and an hour per week that I could be in said office for you to come and visit and have any questions. All right. So you have till Sunday night at midnight to do this. You have plenty of time, but don't procrastinate. Take a look at stuff now. Get it done early. Develop good habits, and don't forget about your quizzes. All right, they're not due until the 27th of March. I know that's a long way away, but as you all know, in academia, almost more so than in other realms of the world, time sneaks up on you. All right, you guys. Well, thank you. I guess I'll call it a day for our first week's Zoom. I hope this works out okay for you as far as time. I like to do it early in the week, so I give you guys plenty of time to mull over everything after the meeting.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's nice
Yeah,
to
thank
meet
you. Thank you,
Yeah, thank
Professor.
you.
You're welcome, you guys. You guys take care.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question for you.
Yes.
Did you get my name down?
You know what? I don't think I did.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure.
No, that better say.
My name's Belle Ruby Martinez. I agree with you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Professor
meet you.
Colwell, so since I am here still at work, and I'm kind of in and out, is it okay if I know you said you have another class, and you're only obligated to, with MJC with one class. Is it okay if I email with questions or something regarding this assignment?
Of course.
Okay.
Like I said, if you don't mind, I would highly recommend Canvas messaging.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
to be honest with you, I'm much better with Canvas messaging than I am with my general emails.
Okay, no, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.